Okay, thank you for joining us. Today's Dharma message, I thought I'd like to talk again, maybe a little bit on Buddhist values. Today, I wanted to talk about being non judgmental. And I think that sometimes that is viewed as being kind of a trait of Buddhism. Maybe we could also call it tolerance or acceptance, right? And so this kind of idea of being non-judgmental. So I'd like to explore that a little bit. Lately, I've been on Fridays. The Grateful Dead have been showing free concerts online, and in addition to that, they've had kind of an interview segment before the concert. So last week, their guest was John Mayer, who is he was a pop star, celebrity. He's also a guitar player, and he joined the surviving members of the Grateful Dead. So they're called Dead and Company. They've been touring for 4 or 5 years now, and I've seen a bunch of shows. And so, John Mayer, I've been aware of him since around 2002 or 3, early 2000s. He had some big pop hits. He would date celebrities, and then kiss and tell. He'd say things about them in the gossip magazines and that kind of thing. So I think back then he seemed kind of like an arrogant jerk. However, when I was in Japan studying, and I remember once going into a guitar store with a friend I'd gone to college with, and heard this incredible guitar playing on the PA, right? In the store, there was this incredible guitar playing. And I was wondering who it was. I was like, is that Stevie Ray Vaughan or, someone I've never heard of? And finally realized it was a DVD that was playing. And so I saw the screen, and it was John Mayer. And so I had no idea how good a guitar player he was. And then, so that was good for me, because it was, sometimes you've already judged someone, and that colors your perception afterwards. So if I'd known it was John Mayer when I first heard it, I don't know if I would have been so impressed. But because I didn't know who it was, I was hearing it more for what it was, with no other judgment, right? So that when I realized, wow, that's John Mayer, he's amazing, I could appreciate the guitar playing, and it also changed my judgment of him, right? It had changed my opinion of him, realizing, wow, he's actually a really, really good guitar player. So by the time he was going to be the guy in Dead and Company and be playing with Bob Weir and Mickey Hart and Bill Kreutzmann, I was a lot of people were kind of against it because of his reputation as a pop star and his songs and his public reputation. But I was open to it because my opinion had already been adjusted because of realizing his musicianship. And then since then, I think he's kind of changed, since joining Dead and Company, and maybe from before. And he actually seems like a really interesting person. And he's obviously a scholar of music, because the Grateful Dead's music catalog is vast. And so he's learned a lot of the songs. He's got a great voice on the songs that he sings. And so I really kind of appreciate him in the group. Now, the interview is interesting because here he is just being himself at home. He talks about the pandemic kind of stuff a lot, which is pretty interesting. And there were times, though, when he would say things, and I was like, wow, he's still kind of arrogant. He still really seems to know that he's right about this point. So I had to go back and watch the video again, because I wanted to make sure, is this my perception? Was it my perception of him coloring my perception of what he was saying, or was he really saying it? So let me kind of try and share what he said. And it relates to gratitude, which is another kind of Buddhist value. So one of the other people on the show, the interviewers, or the people from the Dead camp, were saying, when things get back to normal, because there's been no live music since the pandemic started, right? All the live, they're actually really concerned. We're all really concerned that the music industry is going to collapse, and a lot of venues that have shown, independent venues that show live music, smaller ones may go out of business. Bands are having a really hard time. So anyway, he says, when things get back to normal and we can actually go to shows again, we won't take it for granted. We'll enjoy every second, right? So that realizing, wow, we took so much for granted before. We thought this was normal. Now we realize, wow, this is really special. So John Mayer says, that's totally true, but, and here's, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he says, taking things for granted is part of the enjoyment of things. That's what you're supposed to do. That's entertainment. Being entertained, right? To go on vacation. Look at the sunset. By day 2, you take it for granted. Yeah, I've seen this before. Right? Getting together with friends, taking things for granted, that's a wonderful night. So that's kind of my paraphrase of what he said about this idea of we're not going to take anything for granted again. He says, no, taking things for granted is great. It's wonderful. That's enjoyment. And so to me, it was kind of like, really? Okay. But he states it really strongly. He kind of like criticizes the other two, not criticizes the other two guys, but he kind of says, yeah, that's right, but, right? And then goes on this almost diatribe, where it's almost like a rant about the positive things about taking things for granted, right? And so part of me was kind of like, really? I don't know about this guy, right? And I found myself thinking that. Here's where I have to back up, right? And realize, but isn't that what I do? How can I be critical of John Mayer for saying this when that's a lot of how I live my life? When I'm really enjoying something, am I sitting here thinking, oh, I'm so thankful, I'm so grateful to have this moment, this is so special, I won't take this for granted? No, I take it for granted, and I'm just enjoying. I've gone beyond gratitude, and or I haven't even gotten to gratitude, right? That I'm just enjoying the thing and taking it for granted, right? And so it was really interesting to watch my mind, right? And realize, wow, I was judging him still. Right? Still judging what he's saying, still, being, I don't know, it's really hard. I think this is some of the difficulty that Shinran felt. He wasn't doing something as meaningless or everyday as watching an interview online and arguing with a celebrity, right? But this whole thing of, when we make judgments, when we criticize, is that legitimate? Right? Can I really have I really seen something for what it is, or is my ego so tied up with it? Is my ego and my judgment a part of what's happening in this process? One other interesting experience I had when I used to work at Cody's in Berkeley on Telegraph Avenue, and one of my coworkers one day, for some reason, the Beatles came up, and he said, "The Beatles suck. They're lame. Their music's terrible." Right? And I knew enough at that point not to get in an argument over it. I'm a huge Beatles fan. I don't listen to them a lot now, but they're part of my musical DNA. Like, they were the first rock band that I really got into when I was like 11 years old, and dove in and learned so much about so many things. And I think they're one of the most incredible, most influential bands of the 20th century, maybe even musicians of the 20th century. So to hear someone, just poo-poo it, right? Just write it off. No, it's terrible. It's awful. They're not any good, right? It's kind of like, it's absurd in a way, right? What I realized what he was doing, what he was mixing up his opinion with judgment, right? I'm totally fine with someone not liking the Beatles. I have no problem with that. I get it. You hear it too much, or you just don't like it, right? It doesn't strike you. Or, whatever reason. I totally get it. I'm no problem with someone saying, I don't like the Beatles. But for someone to say the Beatles are no good, their music is no good, that's something else. That's, to me, ridiculous. They obviously have no understanding of music to say something like that, because the Beatles were just so groundbreaking on so many levels. The harmonies that they brought to pop music early on, the experimentation with different instruments, they were kind of at the forefront of that, whether it's like sitar on Norwegian wood or whatever. Rolling Stones did it too, but and then they're beginning to use the studio as an instrument, as a kind of a musical instrument in itself. Was another huge advancement that they were part of in the late 1960s. And it wasn't just them, it was the fifth Beatle too, Sir George Martin, their producer. But, that's part of it too, to think the Beatles is just these four people or just John Lennon and Paul McCartney. No, there was so much more. There was a lot of going on behind the scenes with the producer and the engineers. And so, anyway, I really don't like it when people make value judgments when it's actually just an opinion. That bugs me, just to let you know. But I think it's an important point too, because when you make a judgment and know that you're right, and mistake your opinion for fact, then there's a problem. I'm wondering, is that not a problem of what we're having now? That our political situation and our situation in the United States, and that to be able to be critical, right? But also to leave room for other possibilities, right? And not to be like, oh yes, this is wrong, this is horrible, and all those people should be killed or whatever, right? I mean, it's like people are saying all kinds of stuff now, right? And I wonder if it's kind of related to this issue of judgment. I think Buddhism actually is critical, and that this kind of critical aspect of Buddhism, not critical in the sense of criticizing something, but critical in the sense of looking at it, trying to look at it from different perspectives, trying to be not be opinionated, and to see it from a perspective different than just my own. Now Shinran, I think, realizes he can't do this. Actually, I think for Shinran, he realizes that we're constantly judging and seeing things from what we think is the perspective of fact and truth, but is actually merely the perspective of opinion. And so that really, I think, is key to Shinran. And so in the Tiny Show, for example, which I've been using a lot, he says something about, I do not know the difference between good and evil, which is a really, really fascinating, kind of mind-blowing statement, right? We think Shinran is like the great sage, but Shinran here himself is saying, I don't know the difference between good and evil. I can't judge whether this is a good act or an evil act. And he says that, I think, partly because he realizes I'm stuck in my ego. I can't remove myself from ego. So if I'm going to judge John Mayer, it's a problem. If I can realize, oh, wait, I'm judging him. Who am I to judge? Right? That I need to be able to step back and realize, wait a second. I'm judging this guy for being an egomaniac when I'm an egomaniac, right? That I think that I'm right to judge him, right? That I'm actually guilty of the thing that I'm accusing him of being wrong about. Right? Like I can see myself being in the wrong on at least two levels in this exercise of listening to him say something and thinking, A, this guy's kind of a narcissist and egotistical, and B, he's wrong. Meanwhile, who's the narcissist? Who's the egomaniac? Right? Who's the one who's indulging in what I'm accusing him of being wrong about? So I don't think that we should stop judging. I don't think we can stop judging. I think we need to be critical. But to attach to your opinion and feel like you're right, I'm right, that's problematic. That's maybe where Nembutsu comes in, right? So that if I find myself in righteous anger and self-righteous, right, condemnation of others, Namo Amida Butsu, Naman Dabutsu, wait a second. Right? I think I'm right about certain aspects of this, but at the same time, I can't buy into my righteousness. Right? That I have to be willing to take a step back and see or be shown that, wait, this is my ego talking here. Ultimately, I'll put it at middle way. Right? Ideally, I think that we would be tolerant and accepting of others, other viewpoints. But we also do need to be critical. We do need to, as much as I accept Shinran's statement that I cannot know the difference between good and evil or right and wrong, but aren't there some things that are wrong? Isn't racism wrong? Isn't hurting others wrong? But don't I do that? Right? And so really, 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 that's where I want to get to, and I haven't been able to really write about it, but is racism acceptable? Is racism acceptable as a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist? What is it? What is racism? It's a huge question. What is, how far can I go to be critical and condemn racism, right? And I think it's better to try and see it in myself, right? So that rather than criticize, you're racist, you're wrong, you're bad, I think it's better, more important to be able to say, wait a second, that was racist of me, right? And to be able to see my own racism. So I'm not going to go that far today. I have a lot of work to do on that one. But I want to thank John Mayer. Thank you very much for getting me on this track, right, of recognizing, right, my own judgments of others, pushing me to think about this stuff and not just accept it, but to be able to go a few more steps. Another interesting thing about John Mayer is he's really into Japanese culture, I believe. Apparently he's really into textiles, which he mentions in the interview. And so he really is an interesting guy. And so I'd really like to thank him. I'm going to tag him. We'll see if he sees this. I hope not in a way, but that when we go out there and we engage in judging and righteous anger, as a Buddhist, I feel like ultimate Buddhist value is to not be like that. Jodo Shinshu Buddhist value is be like that and then try and see it. Right? We can't stop it. It's not to try and stop being like that. Don't be judgmental. Don't be mean. Don't be these things, right? To just say that, that's just, it's too easy, because who can do that, truly? It's when I recognize that as a goal, as an ideal, but then find myself doing it. That, to me, is more the Shinshu path. Be shown, oh yeah, that's me. But then, beyond that is Namo Amida Butsu, is the calling voice of Amida, is the wisdom and compassion of Amida, enveloping me and transforming me so that maybe I'm not like that so much. And yet, still engaging constantly in this kind of back and forth of trying to understand what is the right way to be, what is the Buddhist way to be a good person, and then find myself falling short. Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda. Wow, I saw it again. How did I think I wasn't like this, right? And keep going forwards, right, in this kind of back and forth between my own foolishness and the wisdom and compassion of Amida Buddha. So thank you very much, everyone. We're going to keep doing this. Check your Bushin. We have a kind of fun announcement about Obom, and hope to see you online again soon. Okay, thank you. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda.